As International Workers' Day approaches, questions have been raised about safety in the workplace. Statistics show that the Compensation Fund and Rand Mutual Assurance pays out 7 billion rand annually to address occupational injuries and diseases in South Africa. Engineering executive at CBI Electric, Dr. Andrew Dickson, and SAFTU General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi join us now for more on this conversation. Dr. Dickson, allow me to start off with you. Now, reading up on a number of articles, the hazards are a significant cause of workplace injuries and fatalities. How can businesses in South Africa better prioritise electrical safety to prevent accidents and protect workers?
Good afternoon, Hugo, and thank you for having me. So these are just down to basics. And what we do is in our day-to-day business, we kind of forget about going back to the basics and ensuring that our environment that we're working in and that of the workers are safe. So that's where we start. We are guided by a number of rules and regulations around that. We've got the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Underneath that, it's the wiring code, the 10142. And these guide us in the way forward. But it now becomes the onus of responsibility on both the management as well as the workers, because both parties need to come to the table in order to make sure that we are doing the best thing for the environment we're working in. So that's not bypassing things, that's making sure that things are done properly.
Well, Dr. Dickson, we are talking about 7 billion rand worth of claims. So obviously the suggestion that the responsibility is in part on the workers as much as it is on the employer doesn't seem to be working too well if we use that number as a measure.
No, it's not. But remember, everything is about getting output, and that's what business is about. So you've got to watch these things very carefully, because if I don't know, I can't be everywhere. So if I don't know that something's wrong on the floor, then someone needs to step up and tell me. And most companies and businesses will have SHEC meetings, so that's occupational health and safety type meetings once a month. But if these aren't raised up, then how are we going to change this? How are we going to improve the environment to work in, and therefore get us to a safer standard, and then obviously take that number down? Because, I mean, that's a huge number, as you say, and it shouldn't be that high.
Zwelinzima Vavi has just joined us. Mr. Vavi, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining us in this conversation. The issue that we're talking about is the amount that is claimed around deaths and other injuries as a result of failure by either the employer or the employee to look after themselves in the workplace. What is your reaction to this? I mean, that number that we're talking about is 7 billion rand annually.
Well, good morning to you.
If you don't mind tilting down your screen, please.
Is that fine? Or
yes, it is. It is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was saying good morning to you, and good morning to your guest, and good morning to everybody else listening to your program. And today is, of course, the International Health and Safety Day. It's a day dedicated to the health and safety of workers in the workplace. It's a day that workers also use to rally behind the struggle that says we're selling our power, we're selling our ability to think and brains and intellectual property, but we are not selling our limbs and lives. In South Africa, the history of health and safety is a very important history, so linked to the countless mining disasters in our economy, from Kinross to Hlobane to Orkney, everywhere. There's been massive disasters that have robbed many families of their breadwinners. So we're talking to where clearly there is an improvement. And if you look at the statistics that have been issued by the Department of Labor and Employment, it's quite clear that there are some meaningful steps that show that the legislation that was introduced post-1994 is beginning to show some results. For example, they're telling us that in 2022, there were only 49 fatalities reported, and that is versus 74 in 2021. We show that there is a 34% improvement. And they're telling us that in the mining industry, there was a 70% reduction in the mine deaths as a result of the accidents. That must be celebrated. But again, we move from the point that says a single death is a death too many. Workers do not go, and I'm repeating, to the workplaces, to underground or anywhere to smoke through their lungs dangerous chemicals, to die slowly from methane gases, to die from the falling of the rocks underground, and or to even die in the taxis, in the private transport on their way to work. In South Africa, we lose 45 people the last time we checked, every single day in the preventable car accidents. So when we celebrate today, we remember all of those days on the eve of the May Day. May Day is just 3 days from today. It's a day that is centered around this importance of health and safety in the workplace. And so we will be agitating once more to the government, to the employers, to say everybody, of course, has a responsibility to ensure safety. The biggest victory we score in the post-1994 was to enact in the legislation a protection that says a worker must refuse to do a dangerous work. That's absolutely critical to help us save our lives from preventable accidents in the workplace.
All right, before we come to you, Dr. Dickson, I'm still going to ask Mr. Vavi to fix his camera. We only seen just half of you, so if you'd like to tilt your camera down a little bit more. But Dr. Dickson, picking up the conversation, one of the challenges that results in many of the deaths or the accidents is counterfeit products that organizations are either purchasing inadvertently or by case of trying to cut down on costs. Just how much of a contributor is this to the accidents or some of the deaths that occur where electricity is concerned?
So unfortunately, those numbers aren't available. No one will go into the depth of an investigation to that extent. However, I have been involved in counterfeit products for probably about the last 10 years. And certainly the number of counterfeit products, and particularly in the electrical distribution type systems. So here I'm talking plug points, low voltage protection, earth leakages. There is a huge number that come into the country. And again, it is a cost element. So people look at it and they go, well, if I've got to buy this because it's a grudge purchase, they will go and buy the cheapest thing. The problem is that cheapest thing is not necessarily certified. And companies spend a lot of time and effort to certify a product. But you'll go and buy the cheapest thing, put it in, and only when you need that protection, when a shock occurs where a worker is touching a live conductor and the earth leakage doesn't react, that's when obviously we have problems, and that can result in death. And those things need to be stopped. But that's a bigger it's a bigger framework that needs to be addressed. That's coming everything from the regulator down to businesses and people who bring the products in from any of the other markets that manufacture.
Mr. Vavi, it is reported that climate change is increasingly... Okay, we seem to have lost Mr. Vavi. All right, we'll carry on with you, Dr. Dickson. Let's focus a little bit on training and almost a state of preparedness of some of the workers. Just how much training is in place or is lacking, and could be potentially one of those factors that could reduce the amount of risk that individuals are exposed to in the workplace?
So what we find is that there is an initial training, and I mean, everyone experiences this. When you join a new company, you end up going through some sort of induction process, some sort of potential job training. But after your first 6 months, the expectation is that's just what you do. And this is where bad habits creep in. So ongoing training needs to be, and it can be as simple as a 1 hour lunchtime workshop, something that just kind of refreshes the mind, because again, we all get into those habits. We all kind of lose track. We've got this job to do. We've got to get the output. And we forget about taking precautionary. Something as simple as what we call hot swapping. So where a piece of equipment is live and we will pull out a attachment, we will pull out a plug out of the wall socket. These seem trivial, but often it's when we do these things in haste that we land up either causing damage to equipment, causing damage to a person, causing damage to the installation. So it's just about refreshers. And so what I would urge companies to do out there is to make sure that those trainings happen on a regular basis. And I mean, we're talking anything between 6 months to a 1 year sort of period.
Mr. Vavi, thank you. We've got you back on the line. Now, climate change is increasingly affecting occupational safety and health conditions globally. How is SAFTU advocating for policies that address the intersection of climate change and worker safety in South Africa?
Firstly, the responsibility of health and safety is a responsibility of both management and workers in the workplace. But more importantly, it is a responsibility of workers because they stand to lose the most if a fire breaks out, if a ceiling falls on them, or if the stairs to the office are not properly fixed, and or if anything that should be up in place and running is not properly in its proper place. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that ideally there should be regular health and safety drills in all workplaces in South Africa and everywhere else in the world. Now and again, we should go back to check if everything that was in its place is still there, and if every opponent or component of health and safety remains intact. And so that, because things do work, wires do become loose, and they do become hazards all over the place. And so we want to insist that from time to time, there must be drilling, health and safety drilling, and occupational health and safety training, so that everybody knows what to do and where to report and how to fill in the form of an incident and how to call an ambulance and how to move people to hospital in case the ambulance delay arriving. I wanted to just make that point again. Now we're living in a new world where our world is simply changing. Marx called this a metabolic shift, and the Christians says these are end of times because the world we live in is becoming inhabitable. There is rain bombs everywhere in KwaZulu-Natal, now going south towards the Eastern Cape and moving up in Mozambique and towards Kenya. There are now annualized floods everywhere, including in the inner land, Gauteng, Northwest, Northern Cape, not excluded from those disasters. Now, when those disasters come as frequently as they do firstly damage the infrastructure of workers where they live. They do damage the infrastructure where they work, and they make it almost impossible for them to go to work in the context of the floods that are threatening their own lives. And so everything that you would have thought was perfectly in place in the workplace suddenly gets turned upside down whenever there's a flood in South Africa. The SAFTU have joined the rest of the trade union in the world to take up campaigns and to argue that there have to be a new direction to the one that we are traveling in. We accepted long time ago that South Africa's rate of use of carbon is just not sustainable. We cannot continue to walk down this line when we can see the damage that the environment is beginning to cause on our not just working lives, but on our lives generally. We have argued on a just transition in South Africa, a transition that is going to take us away from the carbon-based economy towards renewables. We have argued that South Africa geographically finds itself in a very unique position, that it is a country almost surrounded 180% degree by the sea. That sea is blowing day, night, winter, summer. And we should be taking advantage by building more wind mills and farms to ensure that there is a generation, new kinds of generation of electricity away from the heavy carbon. And we're not arguing, by the way, of this just move away and close mine, close power stations. No, no, no. We are insisting on a just transition where these new renewables will be seen as a substitute to any possibility of mine workers in the coal industries losing their jobs, and as a result of us moving away from the carbon-based economy. So we have to continue with the other allies in the working class. We have to continue to put pressure on the government to embrace the concept of a just transition as meaning that there shall be maximum consultation with workers working in the coal industry in particular, but with workers in general, with communities that will be impacted by any move away from the carbon economy towards renewables. There must be a clear substitute. Workers must see a path that they must embrace, that they're not being asked to embrace just transition at the expense of their very own lives, that they will be thrown into the queue of 11.7 million unemployed South Africans today.
Dr. Dickson, you're obviously sitting on the other side of the fence to Mr. Vavi, and he was talking about health and safety drills. Now, that's something that's incumbent on you as an employer. Is this something that is regularly done in your line of work?
So within my line of work, certainly. So as I said earlier, we have monthly meetings around health and safety. Also, we have, and it is a requirement, legislative requirement, that we fill out health and safety documents on a monthly basis. And these, again, I can't be everywhere, but my staff are everywhere. So if there are issues, these need to be raised up through the formal processes so they can be addressed and ensure that the environment is safe. So certainly, but again, as I mentioned earlier with the training, is that this is something that is ongoing. You know, we constantly have new administrative staff, new staff on the floor. So those people need to go through the necessary training, and then again, refreshers need to happen. Otherwise, yes, you're going to get to the point where your environment becomes unsafe. But if no one's talking about it, then it is going to lead to either an injury or ultimately death. And neither of those actually should really occur.
Mr. Vavi, final question for you. You've obviously talked about some progress that has been enjoyed where issues around workers are concerned. What are your expectations of the next government, whatever the structure of that government is, where workers are concerned and worker safety and workers' issues need to be looked after?
Let me tell you what is our biggest concern. Our biggest concern is that we have a brilliant legislation on paper. Somebody like Jay Naidu normally say, paper accepts anything written on it. It never protects that what you are saying and writing here, you're not going to be doing. And unfortunately, in South Africa, we have a constitution that protects our right, including our right to decent work, and our right to health and safety, our right to refuse to do dangerous work. The critical issue for us is whether we are in a position and we have a government that have prioritized the issue of inspection and enforcement. That's where we are lacking. There's not enough inspectors in the Department of Employment and Labor, and the trade union movement have been weakened over a period of time, and it is unable to step in and enforce these progressive pieces of labor legislation in the workplace. As a result, we have these brilliant laws on paper, but unfortunately, we still have the daunting challenge of enforcing them in each and every workplace in South Africa. In the farms, workers are still the workers are still exposed to dangerous chemicals and so forth. We need to fix that in the next administration, enforceability of all of our victories.